Hey, what's up, everyone? We're back with Explain It To Me. It's been a month, 2 months. I forget when the last time we did anything was. Mortal Kombat, I think. But we're
That was
going to talk
great
about.
movie. Great movie.
I agree. I agree. We might talk about Mortal Kombat here too. But
why not?
Today we're talking about mostly Loki episode 1, and our guest today is Comicstorian. I'm so excited to have you on. You were definitely someone that from the start I really wanted to get you on the show. So glad to have you.
I just have to reach out.
It was mostly just scheduling.
Yeah.
But yeah, so excited to have you on. So we'll just start off by wondering what happened to Molly, and then I'd love to hear just your history with. I mean, obviously you know and love comics, but how did you get into them? Where is your fandom level at for like Loki and Thor and that side of the world specifically?
So I got into comic books when I was a kid. It was a thing I did with my dad. He had his comic collection, pass it on to me. So I've been into the comic books world since I was like 10 years old, off and on. With Thor and Loki, I've always enjoyed Thor, and I know a lot of Thor's history and his comic books, and same thing with Loki. But I've always actually had a problem reading Thor comic books because I speed read a lot of things in general. And they always do Thor's font, like weird Norse mythology. And it just, I stumble over it. So, so when it comes to Thor, I have to like kind of sit down and like light the candle and put on the, the music and just kind of sit there and get the I mean, you know what I'm saying? But it has to be like a private thing with Thor, just me, Thor, and Loki.
Where would you rank like Loki and all of those with, I don't know what is your top favorite superhero? Is Loki one of your tops, or is it one that you're just like, yeah, I like him, but it's not your favorite?
MCU, yes. Comic books, no. He's terrible. He has no personality because he's constantly changing, which works for his character when he shows up for an event. But I mean, it makes it very difficult to follow because most of his books are him getting beat up by Thor. So like there's not much to work with Loki. Like my favorite right now is everyone freaking out about Lady Loki. And so like I'm deep diving into Lady Loki. I'm like, all right, so we got to find the exact Lady Loki story. There is no Lady Loki story. Lady Loki is just what he turns into in the background of like a couple of issues. And that's the extent of it. And everyone's like, no, Lady Loki. And I'm like, it's 4 pages. You want me to cover it? Like
That's funny. Like I assumed, there was more to it. We had a friend that cosplayed as Lady Loki one year at a convention, so I was just like, "Oh, that must be a huge deal."
No, Lady Loki is interesting because initially the first version of Lady Loki, he just stole Lady Sif's body and then ran off. And so he showed up at a few events just as your generic villain as a woman, and then just randomly showed back up as normal Loki. Like they didn't even acknowledge what happened to that whole thing. And then he does in a more recent book, Agent of Asgard, he shows up for 4 pages as Lady Loki. And that's the extent of it. Like there is no Lady Loki storyline to cover.
It's just a thing that happens with Loki sometimes.
He also turned into a horse once, so I mean
well, that's from the mythology actually. So
yeah, well, that's what I mean. But like because they're based on the same mythology, so he just turns into all kinds of things. He's a kid. He got stuck as a kid for a while.
My favorite alternate Loki is King Loki, which is one where he really becomes like a villain. Yeah. Which is kind of an interesting one.
And he gets the All Blade at one point, so he's like, I'm truly evil.
It's like a Loki from the future where he's really become deranged. And that's kind of interesting.
Actually, I was going to ask you too, because I hadn't even noticed you've had those posters up for months. And I didn't realize that 3 of them were Thor related. Like, where does Thor and Loki rank for you? On your comic
I really enjoy them. One of my favorite comic book arcs is there's a Thor comic book arc where you get to have 3 different Thor characters. There's the present Thor, past Thor, and future Thor, and they're all kind of separate, independent characters that are all have a narrative that's like interweaving together because there's a bunch of time travel stuff happening.
That's a good
and then
one.
Again, you have King Loki being a big part of that story. I won't spoil it for anyone, but it's a really good comic book arc. Loki is probably, if you're just talking about villains, he's probably in my top 10. my favorite Marvel character in general is Doctor Doom, and I'm still just waiting for them to actually have a good on-screen appearance of him at some point. But not holding my breath.
Wait, you're not a fan of Fan Four Sticks version?
Not exactly.
I still haven't seen that.
You're not worth it. Not worth unless like you're gonna hate watch it if you're gonna watch it. You don't watch it for any other reason.
I should watch it for trivia reasons at some point, but I'm not looking forward to it. So yeah, let's talk about the episode. I mean, I'll start, even though Molly and I have already discussed it. Molly, what did you think as one of a fellow outsider to a lot of this stuff and only knowing what the MCU has told us? What did you think of it?
I really loved it. It's really interesting, and I'm like very confused on like the TVA. Is that what it's called?
Yeah.
Just that the whole idea of that, and like I don't know, like I'm looking forward to the season, and I think I'm gonna really enjoy it, but I'm just really confused, which is fine.
I thought they did a pretty good job of establishing what the TVA is, but I think that this episode was mostly about getting us to a point where like this Loki is not the one that we saw grow and learn and then die in Infinity War. So I thought that this episode was mostly about getting the Avengers 1 Loki back to a point where like, okay, he's basically the same. Like he learned some things and now we're like on board with his anti-hero stuff. That's my guess as to what this first episode was kind of about.
Well, I think that... Oh, sorry, go ahead.
I was just I actually agree with you on that one because of the way they kind of condensed, because they could have easily stopped him from watching his own death or easily stopped him from watching what happened to they had the whole scene where he watched his whole life play out to see how it went. And he could see things like, oh, I just wanted the approval of my father and my brother. Well, that happens if I do this. And if I go this route, it's going to go to over here. And this is how I get the redemption arc. He got to watch it all. So it's going to be interesting to see basically this Loki who now knows what happened and knows how it led to his death and decides what he's going to do with that moving forward, as opposed to just 2012 Loki. He's a bad guy, like.
Well, and I think that also it's important to remember that something that they've kind of hinted at is that the Loki that we've seen post Avengers has been more true to Loki's just character in general. Because in Avengers, he was being influenced by the Mind Stone. And that was like amping up his hatred of his brother and his hatred of the Earth and made him more of just I'm a bad guy and I'm trying to take over sort of thing. And so, yeah, he wanted to be king of the Earth, but he was a little bit more just straightforward villain because of that Mind Stone influence.
Well, I mean, they kept that influence all the way over. Yeah, the Mind Stone I never took as influencing him in the first one, and I think they carried over the general idea. His whole thing was, I will be ruler. I mean, one of his first statements was, you guys put me here because I won. That's why we're here. I won the whole thing, so it's over. So, I mean, and there was definitely no Mind Stone with those statements. So, I mean, I guess you could look at the Mind Stone as having amped up his desire to rule, but that's generally Loki's whole motive. Yeah, I want to be the king. So, I mean, Thor 2, Dark World, he finally became king by being Odin. And then he just had everyone praise himself.
True.
Well, that's, I think, a good segue into talking about just the TVA in general. And you're talking about, like, yeah, the Mind Stone doesn't work here. So what is going on with the TVA? Where is it like on its own plane of existence outside of time and space? Or, like, where is this?
It's kind of off on its own. The problem is, in the comic books, the TVA has 2 notable appearances in the 80s, and that's about it. And they're generally like a joke. So, I mean, even Googling the wiki to verify what I knew, the biggest appearance was the trial of She-Hulk. So it's not like these are huge characters that are going to pop up.
Or like, in what way are they jokes?
It just no one acknowledges them for the most part. Like when it comes to the Marvel universe, if something doesn't catch on, it just gets shoved over to the side and it shows up as like cameos and jokes and things like that. TVA's kind of fallen into that category.
Yeah, the stuff that they talk about with the multiverse in the video during the episode, where they talk about like the sacred timeline and how there was like the war between the different universes and things. That's very reminiscent of a more recent comic book arc by Brian Bendis called Secret Wars. But oddly enough, TVA wasn't involved in that at all in the comic books because it was like much later since they had been really a thing. So.
Yeah, the multiversal war. Yeah, I didn't even think about how that links into the recent Secret Wars. Yeah, it was all the planets were colliding basically, and they all had to battle and try to fight each other.
Mm-hmm.
So, and yeah, TVA had nothing to do with it. It was ruined by an evil Iron Man, and I don't even know what Captain America was doing, but they ruined it somehow.
Well, it was mostly it was Doctor Doom and Doctor Strange that ended up saving everything.
Yeah, well, they saved it. I was saying Tony Stark and Captain America ruined it because they were like launching a rocket at it or something. I don't even remember.
That was like a multiverse thing? Like they were all colliding in that way?
It was basically like if you imagine a house of cards and all the cards are different universes within the multiverse, and like one of them got completely obliterated, and so then all of a sudden they all started crashing into each other. Huh. And when that happened, one of them had to either become obliterated or they both would be destroyed. And so the universes would literally,
I was joking
like
about Mortal Kombat, but it kind of does.
It's essentially exactly that. Like Earth, everybody on Earth would like look up in the sky and they would see another Earth. And then, because Earth was like the linchpin of the universes, and so then they would have to blow up that other Earth, or both of the worlds would collide and explode.
We had some fun stories in it. They fought a version of the Justice League. Doctor Strange sold his soul to swallow an Earth at one point. I think it was swallowed or something. Like everyone did something weird to get rid of an Earth, and it was all like, "How far will we go?" Kind of an attitude. But you know who wasn't there? Loki or the TVA.
Yeah, neither of them were really. I'm trying to remember if Loki did anything.
I don't think he did other than acknowledge it. I think he just acknowledged it at one point because when the Beyonders were moving around, that's how Doom got involved. And I think that was it. Sorry, we're not helping you explain this to you at all.
Pulling my notes back up.
It's all good.
So are the Timekeepers, are they even from the comics?
Yes and no. The Timekeepers, yes. And the running theory right now is that Kang is going to be involved because he considers himself the Time God. And if you have three individuals who consider themselves the Time Gods, I personally, and I was leaning towards this myself, and then I saw this going around everywhere, I feel like Kang's going to be one of those gods. And that's how, because they played up a lot that there are these higher beings who know a lot of information and they dictate what we do. And we won't reference them. And I think that's a lot for not wanting to directly reference what they are.
And also the like reliefs in the wall that are the Time Lords or whatever they were called, kind of look like Kang also.
Yeah.
So, you know.
And hold on, I'm going to see if I remember something Ashton taught me. Kang is Reed Richards' grandson? Or is that someone else?
Kang's all over the place.
Richards.
Yeah.
It's not his son, but it's like an ancestor or a descendant of theirs.
But he is a Richards.
And very much like Loki, where he kind of changes around, Kang kind of changes around a lot too. Like we had Kid Kang at one point, and there was another Kang.
And there was another universe where Kang was Sue Storm.
Yeah. So Kang could be one of any. All you really need to know is he's a guy that travels through time trying to conquer the timeline to be the ruler. So that's...
But he's a villain that uses time travel.
Okay.
Yeah. And he's blue.
And he normally shows up when the Avengers mess with time. Because they'll do something which incites him to show up and, well, fine, you don't know what you're doing, I'll take over. You know, that kind of an attitude.
Yeah. I'm wondering if we're going to actually see the Time Gods in this, or if they're just going to be referenced.
Well, that's why I think Kang's going to be one of them, and he'll be the guy that shows up.
Yeah, I think that they're going to end up being kind of a nefarious entity in this show because, like, we definitely got this theme of like, well, the stuff that's against the rules is against the rules because we say so.
Yeah,
and sure. I was like, these guys are fascists.
Yeah, and the way that they enforce the rules is just kind of very, well, we decided that this was bad, so here you are.
And like they're literal like kind of stormtrooper people with their batons that disintegrate whoever they want, and like almost I was feeling for Casey who almost got hit by one of them and was like, that's not cool.
His entire cart of Infinity Stones and evidence got destroyed.
Yeah.
I still think one of my favorite parts of this episode is what's a fish?
Yeah. That was great.
I like that they didn't really even elaborate on that. Like, why doesn't he know what does he just live here? Like,
it was giving me real Good Place vibes. If anyone's seen that, like the Good Place is literally just people in a cubicle, like just tallying things, and like that's how it felt. Of just
I got very heavy
innocence.
Doctor Who vibes the whole time.
Mm.
Like they definitely want to make their own kind of version. And of all the characters that you could probably just endlessly make shows about, even if you want to recast, Loki would work. Like he was like, we like Doctor Who, let's make an American one.
Mm-hmm.
I wonder if this is. I'm kind of like trying to think of what this arc is going to be for the show, and now I'm like, yeah, if the TVA it's small in the comics and they've always been treated as a bit of a joke, it makes sense to just. I thought that maybe they'd be a big thing going forward in Phase 4, but maybe it's just that they're the villains of this series in the end, and they get taken down, and that's what causes like whatever. It seems like Phase 4 is going into the multiverse direction. So if the TVA is not there to oversee it, then that's what could happen.
Well, and there's some entities from the comic books that kind of fill the role that it seems like the TVA is kind of doing. Like there's characters like the Beyonders and stuff in the comic books where they're people that exist outside of the multiverse that are kind of policing what is and isn't okay. And it seems like that's kind of where they're going, where they're like they're so powerful that they're just above caring about the Infinity Stones and things like that, and all they care about is making sure that the timelines don't destroy themselves. And in this case, making sure there is only one timeline that's valid, which that's unique to this, because in the comics there's all sorts of different, timelines and universes and things.
I mean,
depending on whether
timelines,
and depending on whether timelines constitute a different universe within the multiverse, it seems like they made it kind of the same thing. So
this came up in chat. That's a question that I was going to bring up. Their little reset charges or whatever they were called.
The
How do those
rewinding.
work? Yeah.
Oh yeah. Well, and again, that's one of those things where I honestly feel like a theme of this episode was none of this stuff is going to really be something you can think too deeply about. Like a lot of it just works because they say it works,
Yeah.
And similarly to the what is and isn't a time crime. Well, the things they say are time crimes, and there doesn't seem to be like a hard and fast rule for what it is that defines that.
Like a time crime that was supposed to happen is okay. Like, because I was like, yeah, the Avengers mess with time, and they're like, no, they were supposed to.
Yeah. And then Loki literally just like escapes using a time box, and that's a crime.
I do like how they just arbitrarily, like they answered those questions that every fan would have asked if they didn't mention the Avengers. It's like they knew, like, okay, if we're going to call this a time crime, we at least have to acknowledge that the Avengers spent a whole movie time traveling,
like messing with time and breaking what was supposed to happen. Like
That was all part of the plan.
Yeah. Well, so going back to what you said about like the multiverse and Kang and Timeverse, way early rumors. I'm talking like 2 years ago. The rumor for Phase 4 was that it was going to be like split into two. So we'd have the multiverse and Kang would be the main villain, and then we'd have Street Level, and Street Level would have its own kind of thing going on. And so far between WandaVision, Captain America, and Bucky, and then this, it seems like we're kind of doing that. We're separating.
So
The
by Street
MCU
Level,
is too
you
big.
mean like Captain or the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, things that happen more just on Earth.
Sorry, I called them by their names at the end. No, yes, but exactly. More Earth level, they're going to deal with super soldier serums and, things that they can handle. I think the MCU might be trying to get away from the DC problem where you're like, how is Batman fighting Darkseid? It doesn't make sense if you actually think about it. And I think the MCU is like, you're right. So they're going to fight things they can fight.
mm-hmm.
And so who are the kinds of heroes that take on like the multiverse? I assume Doctor Strange would be one of them.
Well, Doctor Strange, Wanda, Captain Marvel, Spider-Man somehow gets involved in everything just because he's popular.
Which
Why not?
which every rumor about Spider-Man No Way Home, is that what it's called? That
He's in the multiverse as well. He's literally the superhero that will go through the multiverse adventure and then drop in the street level and just fight a thug. Like,
but then you also like it's a frequent thing in the comics where they will sprinkle in those like characters that you normally would only see, stopping, a nuclear weapon from going off or something, but not really stopping the multiverse from collapsing, they'll throw them in and just be like, yeah, they're on the Guardians of the Galaxy for this week or whatever, you know. And then they get thrown in and are in over their head, and it's fun, you know.
So I mean, the MCU could very easily be going in two directions right now, dealing with multiverse and Kang, and that could be like what's going on with the timelines. But we've already been implied that, you know, the Power Broker and the Madame Hydra, I think that's what her official name is, but from the Captain America, the Falcon Winter Soldier show. So we could very easily have these two arms kind of going off and the rumors being true. I try not to feed into rumors and like believe them because rumors go everywhere. But so far, it looks like it might actually be happening in that where we just have two separate MCU projects happening.
Mm-hmm.
So what are the stakes where they say, like, yeah, Infinity Stones do not matter here. And Loki's like, oh, this is the greatest power in the universe. So if the TVA is not around, or like, regardless of whether or not they exist, what are the big stakes with the multiverse? And if it starts to collapse in on itself, what bad thing would happen?
Ultimately, everything is literally happening in comics right now. So Mephisto is working with Phil Coulson to alter the entire timeline so that nobody found Captain America. And instead, we got the Squadron Supreme, which is basically evil Justice League in the Marvel Universe. And so that's literally the kind of it's the storyline literally happening at the moment called Heroes Reborn. So that's the kind of thing we could see. Big change. They could change whatever they want. They could use the DC excuse of the punch that revived all their favorite characters from the dead. It's comics. It could do anything.
Yeah. And it's anything from like that, where it's just like, oh, the timeline gets rewritten and now stuff doesn't like go the way that it's supposed to. Or if what that video in the TVA was, you know, if what that was saying was actually accurate, then you might end up with a bunch of timelines, and then they all start fighting with each other, and then they destroy everything.
Yeah, leading towards the Secret Wars, and that'd be the next movie, which would be incredible.
Oh yeah.
Or they break the timeline and mutants are introduced in the 1920s, and here's how that happened.
Yeah. Is that like an Infinity War level event? Secret Wars, or not? Secret
Wars. Secret Wars was one of the biggest events that has happened recently, because it literally like took over every Marvel comic that was running at the time, because it was a universe spanning thing. Basically, the entire Marvel universe got wiped out and replaced with a universe where Doctor Doom was God. He had a bunch of Thors that were his police force / military. Like all the Thors from all the different multiverses were working for him because he had fixed it that way. Doctor Strange had kind of gone a little bit crazy, was like his advisor, Merlin kind of character. It was really weird and cool, and it lasted for, I don't know, like a year, something like that.
Oh, wow.
Basically, in order to save the multiverse, Doctor Doom took the remnants that he could find and mashed them together as the battle world.
Yeah.
So, you had, like, all your favorite what if storylines were all these different multiverse things. Like,
and you had like countries for each former world, except for certain entities that he pulled out, like the Thors that were his police. He also pulled all the Hulks out and put them all in their own continent so they couldn't break everything. And all the like super dangerous villains he put in like Antarctica, like Thanos and Ultron and Annihilus.
It was very weird.
That's
it was awesome, but very weird.
It was super cool, but super weird. Yeah.
It's interesting that you talk about having all these what if scenarios, and they're also doing this what if show, and it could be tied into the multiverse in some way, of just saying we're going to explore these other that like this happened in another universe.
Yeah.
And it's just, we're animating it. Huh.
It just seems like they really want to lean into the whole multiverse what if kind of idea. Like they did the 10-year plan. We told the big story. We had the big Thanos moment. It's very linear. Now that you're all invested and you all know what the Marvel universe is like, let's show you how big it can get. I think that's the vibe I get from what they're doing. Because if you think about it, we didn't have any crazy superpowered characters until Captain Marvel came down, and then they pretty much unlocked Wanda's power, and they pretty much showed more of what Thanos can do. We started really opening up. And so I feel like now that we're hitting these cosmic level events, other than Captain Marvel, it's pretty much Guardians was our only cosmic-y. And even that, they kind of kept weirdly grounded for what it was. Like you never got that space opera feel that you do when you're reading a Guardians book.
Yeah.
And now it feels like, Thor, Love and Thunder. We got the new Guardians one. They got all these crazy people coming into that one. We got the multiverse. We've got the cosmic level villains that we don't know about, but they're being referenced. And I feel like they just you opened the can of worms. It's out. Marvel is out. Deal.
I'm really hoping that we get to see the Shi'ar Empire next. With
I
Gladiator
want
and all
Nova Corps
them.
to show up.
Yeah, well.
I mean, you can't.
Don't
You gotta
kill
if
them
you're
the
gonna bring
third
it up,
time.
you have to explain it.
Yeah.
Oh, it's just Nova Corps is basically
Nova Corps, I remember.
Yeah. Nova Corps, they're an intergalactic space force. They're the equivalent for Marvel of what the Green Lanterns are, but the MCU keeps killing them. So
And then Shi'ar Empire is basically like a counterpart to the Kree and the Skrulls. It's another galactic empire, but it's ruled over sort of through a meritocracy of if you can defeat the Emperor, then you become the Emperor. And their current emperor is this guy. Well, he's not actually, I don't think anymore, but there was this guy that was the emperor for a long time named Gladiator, who's basically the Marvel version of Superman, except that his powers are linked to his confidence in what he's doing. And it's really cool. He's a cool character.
Cool.
Yeah.
We'll
I can see how just the idea of the multiverse would be the next step, just because we've talked about this back when we were seeing at Infinity War and Endgame and stuff. I think just the idea of power creep, and it's we're getting bigger and bigger and bigger characters like Thanos, and it's okay, well, what can top that? Instead, we're gonna go over here and just mess with the timelines and see what happens.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, and I always appreciated the way that Marvel handles that. From a comic book standpoint, I always thought they handled it a little better than DC, because with DC, you have the main heavy hitters like in Justice League, but they're also different as far as their power level goes. But DC just always kind of explains that away, and it's but Batman's still going to fight Darkseid, or whatever, just because he's Batman. Whereas with Avengers, it's with the Avengers, if they're fighting some threat that's pretty much just Earth level and it's not really that serious, then they don't bother calling Thor because they don't need him. And he's busy.
Yeah. Well, Marvel's always had that more grounded approach to it. I mean, the name for DC with the Injustice game, Gods Among Us, is literal. They're supposed to be these gods. It's just the problem with either side, Marvel versus DC. Whenever you try to overthink them, it doesn't make sense. Every superhero's in New York, but somehow when Spider-Man's in a fight with Green Goblin and a building falls, he's still the only one there.
Yeah.
They kind of got around that a bit in the first in Homecoming, because Iron Man showed up to help save that ferry. Well, I guess he technically didn't. That was just his suit.
Yeah, it was just his suit. The MCU's done a little bit better job of kind of acknowledging why. When Ant-Man approached the Avengers base and ran into Falcon at one time. They've been kind of doing a little bit better job of acknowledging that these other guys exist in the universe at the same time. But you still always have that question of why aren't they just calling each other? What?
Mm-hmm.
Well, and also the MCU hasn't been quite so everything happens in New York in the same way that the comic books do.
They're doing a much better job of spreading it out. All of Captain America, Winter Soldier, Falcon, Winter Soldier happened over in Europe. So it makes sense. So that they wouldn't be able to get a hold of Scott or anybody like that. So. Mm-hmm. Still would have been epic if we just saw Ant-Man running over there, though.
I think I've got all my questions answered. Molly, do you have any more? If not, we'll move into chat.
I don't think I did. Not for this first episode.
Cool. Okay,
That's my only complaint about this episode. I felt like it spent so much time world building and just kind of explaining away things like, oh, why are the Avengers not here? What version of Loki is this? Does Loki... It was an amazing episode, but it didn't leave a lot of room for theory crafting outside of the very tail end. Yeah, and I know the big theory right now. I'm just curious why we're it's a variant Loki, but we're not going to show him. So everyone's well, which variant is? That's really the only open-endedness that's in the episode, unless you're deep diving into when they showed the TVA and the car moved over to the left a little bit, it showed this light, and unless you're playing that game, you really don't have much to run with on this one. It's just a great episode. And that's all I got.
So the idea, maybe you talked about this already when I was figuring out how to get my AirPods to work. The idea of Loki helping them find a different Loki. Did that happen in the comic books?
Not that I know of.
I mean,
Loki doesn't have too many specific Loki storylines, though. It's the problem. So
there have been times where they've gotten Loki to help with fighting King Loki.
Yeah.
Yeah, but that's not really what's happening here, I don't think. I mean, unless it turns out that the Loki they're hunting is King Loki, which would be super cool. But
would Loki be more likely to team up with another Loki, or would he be like a Highlander kind of, there can only be one and he doesn't want to share any power?
Probably the latter.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mostly less because he doesn't want to share power and more that he doesn't want to share the spotlight. Sort of.
Yeah,
thing.
but evil Loki at the end of time pretty much helped whoever came and asked him questions. That was like the whole Kid Loki thing where he was stuck in the time. And
yeah, that's true. I forgot about the Kid Loki stuff.
Yeah, I mean, Loki's weird. Yeah, Loki is so obscure in the comics that his 2000 book, which was like 4 or 5 issues, got republished and renamed. It was originally called Loki. They renamed it Thor and Loki. Thor shows up just enough to punch Loki. Like, he doesn't. He's not even in the
usual.
book. Yeah, but they renamed his book. That's how unpopular in the comics he is in comparison to his MCU appearance.
How do you think this is going to end for Loki? Like, will he be eventually put back to where he should be in his timeline? And then, like, is this like a swan song for Loki as we know him, and Tom Hiddleston playing him?
I'm hoping this is setting up almost like an ongoing. Like, I know I joked about Doctor Who, but I would love if they're like, if we're going to keep Loki, we'll make that the first ongoing. If it does well, we'll keep going. Because you can do that with a timeline, time travel storyline. I would love if that's what the whole point of this is. Because I don't feel like we needed this. Loki got his full redemption arc and then he got killed off.
Mm-hmm.
So we didn't need this. It wasn't like Wanda where we're going to fill in the gaps and try to figure out what's going on with the powers. It wasn't, Falcon Winter Soldier where it's like, well, who has the shield? We got to figure that out. Loki, even when they announced it, was like, what? Why? Like, we finished his story. So I'm hoping this is intended to go much farther than just an 8-episode run.
Yeah. If I had to guess, my prediction would be that the TVA, first of all, the TVA is not all it cracked up to be. I don't think that they really either they haven't actually gotten rid of all the other multiverse, universes, or something's going to happen to the TVA during this show so that they are no longer actually controlling that, because we know that Doctor Strange Multiverse of Madness is coming up.
Mm-hmm.
So we know that they're going to start exploring the multiverse stuff. So how does that happen? If the TVA is like eliminating everything but the sacred timeline, I think that that's going to either that's not actually the case, or that's going to change over the course of the show. And if I would guess that Loki's going to probably like escape, and Mobius is going to just like let him go.
Like, maybe Loki's going to break the TVA basically, and the multiverse is going to reopen, which will lead to all these upcoming movies all about the multiverse.
Yeah, he might go back in time and prevent the TVA from starting. Somehow,
maybe that's what do you think this other Loki is even up to? Because it does seem to be fighting against the TVA kind of specifically.
Yeah, pretty specifically,
and taking those little charges.
Yeah.
The only thing I can think of is he is trying to alter the timeline so that instead of dying, he takes the power from Thanos. Like, that's his ultimate goal. Like, okay, so I saw how I died. Well, let's fix that. I'll get more power. That's really all I could think of, because that's the problem with the show right now. It's fun to come up with fun theories and stuff, but with his arc being so concluded, it's so hard to guess what they're even going to do. I mean, I know it's our job, so we can come up with a cool bunch of ideas like Mephisto's behind it all, but
I mean, it could also turn out that like Loki is like 90% of what the TVA has to police. Like, maybe there's just a bunch of Lokis that we end up seeing him have to go stop. And there's this one that's like a serious problem, which is why they recruited Loki to help them. But also he's constantly an issue for them because he is like the god of mischief. I could see that being,
that would
he
be
breaks
fun.
Stuff all the time.
Like every episode, maybe after the TVA is dismantled, Loki still kind of is just time traveling and dealing with another version of himself. Well, we can take some chat questions. In our first one, we got a Streamlabs from Therild. Thanks so much. The guy Casey was Pillboy in The Good Place. He was also in The Mandalorian on Sorgan in the episode Sanctuary.
Oh yeah.
He's one of the villagers. And Thurl says the judge is one of Kang's servants in the comics, and also the kitty in the office was cute.
Oh yeah, was that
Molly
a
did
was
perk
that
up at
a
the kitty.
what was it called, a flurg or whatever?
I like that.
Loki into the Lokiverse.
Was it really a cat or was it one of those aliens?
Oh,
from Captain
right.
Marvel.
Mhm.
I don't know. That's a question for you. How can you tell? How do the
I have no
scrolls
idea.
know? The scrolls knew right away.
It's true. Yeah.
So let's see. That judge. Did that character have a name?
I had to look her up, honestly. I'm not even going to try to pretend I knew. She's from the comics.
That's fun. Like that's what I have to do for every Star Wars thing, and it's
Yeah.
fun that I was just like, oh, I had no idea. I didn't even think to Google her.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's how I am too. I've been doing Loki discussions all day, and everyone's like, "What about Gugu Mbatha?" And I'm like, "What about her?" Like,
Sounds like a name from Wikipedia.
yeah, that's the actress's name. She's playing Ravonna Renslayer, who's a former hunter turned judge. In the comics, she's a time traveling princess linked to Kang the Conqueror. So, which leads into all the Kang the Conqueror theories, you know.
That's always fun. Just like you never know if they're putting something in deliberately to foreshadow, or if they're just like, we're gonna bring this character in and it's kind of similar to this comic person. Yeah, let's just name him the same thing and move on, and then everyone else overanalyzes it.
You must be
Call-
loving that with the
call-
Star Wars fandom right now.
Oh yeah, I mean it's constant.
Well, they're in the extended universe. Ah.
It's like the devil stained glass window, for example.
Yeah. Oh, it's the devil.
Oh no.
I did see.
I read an article where they were talking about that, and they had watched WandaVision, and they had already done most of the filming for this, and they were like, "Oh no!"
Yeah,
the way that everyone went crazy about Mephisto.
I saw the same thing, but they were like, we were just referencing Loki because he has horns and he was like cast out of heaven. That's it. But they might be lying.
But they
You
could
never
be
know.
lying to us. Yeah.
Did we talk about who Mobius was, or if
Oh yeah,
his stuff in the comics?
I didn't mean to
He's
ask
a
a little bit about-
I do know a little bit about that one. He's not actually anybody. He's supposed to be he was modeled after the guy who was supposed to either keep track of continuity or keep track of storylines at Marvel Comics. So he's not like he was supposed to be a nod to a creator. And that's all he really is. There's nothing else going on with him outside of that. So,
But he's like an agent for the TVA that goes around doing things.
I really liked Owen Wilson in the MCU.
I thought he was great. I thought he had really good chemistry with Tom Hiddleston as well.
Yeah, I'm excited to see more of him because it was just weird seeing him in an MCU role, and just like, I don't know, he's such a typecast actor. I'm like, okay, what's he gonna be like in this show?
Mm-hmm.
Is this like? It's kind of reminding me of when Woody Harrelson was cast in Solo, and I was like,
Yeah.
I don't know how I feel about this. And then I liked him a lot, but
Yeah.
he was great in that role. Solo needs justice.
oh yeah, I love Solo.
Yeah, I am waiting for the Owen Wilson wow.
Wow.
Whenever that's going to happen.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure it'll happen at some point in the show.
Yeah.
Loki,
Yeah. There you go.
I think it's involuntary at this point. He just falls out.
Yeah.
Are you as comic fans like excited for the multiverse thing to really take off, or is it something that you're like, oh boy, here we go?
Kind of more the second option, because it gets very confusing in the comics already.
For me, I like it. I think it's interesting. It gives them the opportunity to, as long as they don't overdo it. Like I was somebody who really, really enjoyed the Ultimate Marvel series, like the Ultimate Marvel series when they were doing that, which was one of the alternate dimensions of Marvel, which was its own separate comic book run, or several comic book runs. But that allowed them to create a lot of like, and maybe it's just because when I was a kid, I read a lot of the What If comics, where it was like, oh, what if this person picked up, the Infinity Gauntlet instead of so-and-so, that sort of thing. And so the Marvel universe allowed them to really explore a lot of those sorts of ideas. and you got some really cool characters out of it, and then a lot of them got incorporated into the actual main storyline. So, you know, like you have like, oh, what if Reed Richards was a bad guy? You know, like a legitimate bad guy.
I mean, Marvel Zombies started as just a fun little what if in the Ultimate Universe, and then it became its own what if, and then it became its own thing.
And then it was its own country in the Secret Wars thing that we mentioned earlier.
We just put all the zombies over there.
Yeah,
That's
they
what he
literally
did.
had like walled off areas, and it was like, that's where the zombies are. Don't go over there.
So it's a lot. It's like where the name Black Panther becomes King of the Dead in that series, because he finds a way to control all the zombies. He's like, aha! I have the zombies go.
Yep.
That's cool.
This is like, yeah, that's really making me want to read this Secret War thing.
Oh, yeah. If you want to read one crazy, gigantic comic book arc, read that one because it's super cool.
The best
All right.
part about it is you can read like a 4 or 5 series of volumes to lead up to it, but the nature of it is that it starts from the beginning of the fall.
Yeah.
So you don't have to read any of the you could literally just go, okay, I know that this happened, the planets crashed, what's next? And read from there. Because the story at that point pretty much goes in its own direction.
Also, they don't really explain what happened. Like, there's a point where it's like, oh, everything's getting blown up. And then Secret Wars starts, and everybody's like, why? And they don't explain it until much later. And so, as a reader, you can really start there and experience it perfectly.
Are there any other... I mean, you already said that they didn't base this off of anything existing, this show, but are there any like essential Loki arcs you'd recommend checking out?
You could read some fun Loki stories.
Sure.
But that's the problem with this. There's no essential Loki stories because Loki's just a bad guy Thor beats up normally. Recently, with his popularity, he's had some like centralized stuff. There's like Agent of Asgard, which came out after War of the Realms. And then there's the Vote Loki joke, which is basically him, oh, I'm going to be a good guy. And look at me, I'm going to go for president. Like, and if you're cool with political humor, it's a great book.
And that's in the show also. Like, we see a shot of Loki.
I was going to say,
like one for one from the comic book art of that book as well.
That's
That's
cool.
pretty cool.
But there's not really any Loki-centric stories. There's no essential reading. This isn't like WandaVision where it's like, all right, well, go read Vision's solo book, go read House of M. You'll have a general idea what they're doing. Or with, you know, Falcon Winter Soldier, it's like, okay, so here's Falcon's entire journey as Captain America. This is the book you can read. That doesn't exist for this one. There's nothing.
Mm-hmm.
Do you like that, or do you prefer to see an adaptation?
I like it when it's something I don't know, because the problem with the adaptation, I'm waiting for the adaptation to happen for me. I like it when a comic book is show, like example, Sweet Tooth just came out, and I'm loving Sweet Tooth, and I've never read Sweet Tooth, so I can appreciate where it came from, but I'm not sitting here going, this is the scene where such and such is supposed to die. You know, like
yeah, I can see that would be a lot more exciting. Same for Star Wars, I guess. Like if it's something we know is going to happen versus all new stuff.
Oh,
you guys must hate it when they reference the extended universe, because when they got rid of that, I personally liked it because I'm like, I have no idea what's going to happen now.
I mean, I loved the extended universe, and I was fine to just like get some new fresh stuff, and people are always like, oh, what they should adapt this or that, and I'm like, I don't want them to adapt anything. I want to watch something new or read something new.
Yeah, right now the High Republic is probably the thing that we're both the most excited for because it's all brand new stuff.
Not connected to anything.
Thing that they've done before and they're doing again, but it's still fun.
Yeah, right. I mean, they're still doing some big surprises in that. Do you keep up with Star Wars comics?
I sit down with them in batches and read through them. It's not like I don't read them on a weekly basis like every other comic, because I have my list of I have to reads, and then I have my list of like, oh, I can relax and read some fun stuff, and Star Wars falls into that one for me.
Yeah.
Nice.
War of the Bounty Hunters has been good so far.
Yeah, I read the beginnings of it, and I'm like, I'm going to let it finish and just read it all in one big flow. So...
I was going to say I like the stuff that from your earlier question of whether it's better when it's something completely new or not. I like when it's something completely new because it's less predictable, and you don't have to have that debate of like, well, did I like this better than the original version of it from the comics, or is it worse than the original? Oh, I wish they had done it this way. Or, you don't have any of that, which is nice. But at the same time, it is cool when they pull stuff direct, like the Falcon costume from Falcon Winter Soldier. That was like straight out of the comic books, and it was really cool to see that in live action done really well.
I I agree.
It's interesting to see something like this where you're like, yeah, the TVA was barely in the comics, so we don't really know what's going on there. Where at least with Falcon and the Winter Soldier and WandaVision, it's like, yeah, we have some things that they're not one for one doing House of M, but we can kind of guess where they're going. We know who John Walker is, so we can kind of see where they're going to head with this story. But with Loki, it's like, I don't know.
Yeah, and with the TVA, it's like, well, they could do all sorts of different things with it.
Like, who knows what they're going to turn Owen Wilson's character into? I doubt he's just going to stay the plucky, jokey guy the whole show.
Yeah, he could be Kang the Conqueror. Who knows?
That would be a twist.
Yeah.
Dude, I didn't even think of that. We get to the end and he's like, "It was me."
He's like, "Wow."
he has to Scooby-Doo the mask, though. You know.
Yeah.
Well, does Kang have a like very specific look that he needs to have, or could
Well,
he?
he's blue.
Yeah, he's
he's a
blue and a
robot.
robot, basically. That's what he looks like.
Yeah.
Oh, he must be behind the gum that kid had then.
Oh,
Blue gum.
uh-huh.
Yeah.
Boom.
I was
it out.
surprised that gum was in the credits, and I was like,
Yeah.
"Is
It was
this
in
a
the
hint?"
credits.
Yeah, the kablooey gum was in the credits.
Yeah. I kept seeing people talk about all the Easter eggs in this, but obviously we didn't really catch any hardcore Easter eggs. Were there any that we hadn't talked about or anything that you guys noticed?
Yeah, I've only watched it once, so I didn't catch anything in particular that was like a huge Easter egg, but I could.
Let me see if I can.
Probably miss.
No, according to this website, even stuff that you would assume is an Easter egg, like One Me Mosaku, isn't. There's literally a Den of Geek thing going, these things aren't Easter eggs.
Yeah, I mean, like I looked up the kablooey gum to see if that was like some weird Easter egg that I was missing the point of, but it's not, as far as I can tell.
I'm gonna grab an image real quick because I figure there's got to be something in this drawer full of evidence.
Oh yeah,
like there's a handful of Infinity Stones, but
yeah. Then there was like a metal. I paused it there as well. There was like a metal. There was
a cross.
Yeah, there was a crucifix.
All right, I've almost got this. We can look at it and wonder.
If I can pick something up that I missed.
All right, here it comes.
That was a great part where he was like, "Oh yeah, the Infinity Stones. We get a lot of those.
We have a lot
here.
of those.
Oh, it's kind of dark, but yeah.
Yeah.
I like how there's quite a few red ones. Just it's like this.
Yeah.
The thing up in the top right almost looks like a piece of the DeLorean or something.
It just looks like a computer fan.
I'm trying to think if that
Yeah.
like cross
Real
slash
chunky
star
fan.
thing is anything, but that doesn't even look like anything. Like it could be any number of things, basically.
Yeah.
This looks like someone's junk drawer in the kitchen.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure that's what they were going for. And the idea that the Infinity Stones are just like, put them in the junk drawer.
Paperweights.
I want to know
So-
who, like, they stole a medal from somebody.
So, question:
Whose
do you
medal did they
think
steal?
that Loki palmed that time stone?
I think that the time stone's the orange one, isn't it?
No, it's the green one, I think.
Well, because there's multiple of all of them.
Yeah, but he picked up a green one, and then we don't see him put it back in the drawer on screen. We hear a noise of it, like supposedly going back in the drawer.
Green? Yeah.
I mean, I just like the idea that none of that stuff works or matters in this place.
Well,
It
one of
doesn't
the things they do in the Secret Wars when they're setting it up, one of their ideas originally is like, we'll get all the Infinity Stones and we'll just destroy all the other planets by using the Infinity Stones. But they discover that the Infinity Stones only work in the timeline they were discovered. So the moment they leave, they just don't function anymore.
Yeah.
Yeah,
That's cool. That feels like very Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah.
Like, you got to get these 7.
Don't forget about the Namek ones.
Uh-huh.
which I guess
That's
is
fun, though. I like that
different to
limitation.
MCU, but yeah.
Are there any big cameo characters that you guys are hoping to see in this show? Big characters or smaller ones from the comics?
Doctor Strange. I'm hoping
Big one, okay.
Apparently they discussed him showing up in WandaVision. Would love it if he actually did show up in this one.
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah, that would be cool. If we get Kang, then there's the potential for some weird name drop Fantastic Four references, perhaps. But I'm not going to hold my breath on that.
No, I don't think they're going to do anything involving X-Men, mutants in general, or Fantastic Four until they do their movies.
Yeah,
I really doubt they're going to be like, and the mutants were first mentioned in this. I could see the ramifications of Loki's time travel setting up that possibility, but I don't think they'll even name drop any of it. It'll be like, we changed the timeline a little. Some things are out of place and other things have happened. You know, like that. That's what I could see happening.
I mean, like, I could see, like, if Kang shows up and then they're like, oh, yeah, this guy. And then on the dossier, it's like Nathaniel Richards. And it's like, oh, God, it's Richards.
Yeah, yeah. I can see the last name drop. Yeah, I can see that. Just Richards is dropped somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So originally, Loki was supposed to air after the Multiverse of Madness. So I was going to guess, like, yeah, maybe Doctor Strange will pop up at the end as like a post-credits tease for the next movie. But I mean, that's still possible, just the way the production went. But I wonder if
they've been doing a ton of reshoots for the other shows. I imagine they probably did the same thing for this one. So who knows?
Okay, maybe. So originally, What If was supposed to come on after Loki. That was the next project. So maybe he'll go to an animated universe, and that'll be...
Ooh.
That would be hilarious if he just pops into a cartoon for a little while.
Yeah, I could definitely see this show setting up a bunch of weird crossovers later, where it's like, oh, and then Loki shows up out of nowhere and, like, you know, changes something and then disappears again.
It would be really cool if there's... I don't know, just a montage almost of him going to different universes and seeing things. And just to see characters that we know in very strange situations that you're just like, well, how did that happen? And then he's gone and we don't get to see anything more. Like, that would be fun.
Yeah.
I kind of got that vibe. This is maybe a huge stretch, but I got that vibe from the title credits where it's just his name and a bunch of different looking fonts. Like each letter looked really different. I was like, maybe that means we'll see him and like other characters just in all these different situations.
Yeah, could be.
They rewrote Doctor Strange 2 with the same writer as Loki. It's interesting. Is that... Yeah. Have they filmed that?
I thought Doctor Strange 2 was done. Or it started.
I thought it was done too.
Yeah.
Okay.
At least it started. I believe it at least started. I know Thor's done. Spider-Man's done. Spider-Man's done, right? They did the wrap photos in that one, yeah. Black Widow's
I am very excited for... I am very excited to see the Thor... Was it Love and Thunder?
Love and Thunder, yeah.
Yeah. Just because Natalie Portman.
Yeah, I was surprised to see her actually come back to the Marvel projects because there was so many rumors about her not really liking her time working on them.
Well, when you get offered to be Lady Thor.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that might have changed her tune a little bit, you know? She's like, I don't really want to be a part of this anymore. I'm just the damsel in distress. Like, but what if you were saving?
Yeah.
Could the Multiverse War be the Multiverse of Madness and we haven't seen it yet?
Maybe. I mean, it's a bunch of time travel. Like, things could happen out of order.
That's true. So, like, the timekeepers could save things from something that technically hasn't even happened in the timeline yet.
Yeah. Huh. I mean, that, or it could be like, oh, this show ends with the TVA basically going away, and then the multiverse goes all out of whack because they're not there to police it anymore. Yep. And then Doctor Strange has to find some way to fix it that isn't tyrannical, preferably.
Huh. I think it's so funny that, like, I was not expecting you to say that the TVA was not a big thing in the comics. I imagined there was like this rich backstory I was going to learn, and
I even looked into them, like, because like as soon as the episode ended, I'm like, I have never heard of them, and I googled it and of course pulled it up, and it was like the first appearance was like 1986 in a Thor book, and the only thing in the wiki is the Trial of She-Hulk.
Yeah, it's sort of like a less popular version of like AIM, which was another which was like what we talked in WandaVision. We talked about them because the beekeeper suit, and they're just like dudes that show up every once in a while and then get smacked around and then disappear, you know, like TVA was kind of that for a while they were actually getting written into stories. They would just like show up, their agents would do a thing, and then they, you know.
I love the idea that they're taking such a small little thing and making it a huge deal.
I mean, they've done that with a lot of things, though. Even characters you assume are huge, big deals, like Guardians of the Galaxy, for example. What they do in the MCU is totally different. And I mean, yeah, they've got a rich history, but none of it's been used. Yeah. They've written their own everything basically at this point. And then the comics team do that.
Like, and the people on the team were even different than what Guardians was at the time.
At the time of that happening, they were all super serious. Groot had full speech. They were in the like. The MCU's just been doing that since the beginning, basically, just completely altering characters. That's why I'm interested to see what they're going to do with characters like Moon Knight, who have a real big fan base that know his history. He's very niche, but the ones who like him, they know him. So it's going to be interesting to see what they do with it.
I'm excited for that for Oscar Isaac.
Oh, yeah.
Well, I think we're coming up to the end. I'll keep an eye out for like one more question in the chat. But while I do that, Benny, why don't you tell everyone where people can follow you online and get more comic expert knowledge?
Pretty much if you search the term Comicstorian, it's me everywhere. We're on TikTok, Instagram, Twitch, YouTube, like Facebook. I like to joke that we have a hot dog stand on the street called Comicstorian at this point. So
yeah, we've got links to those in the chat too. Or not in the chat, in the description.
Yeah. We haven't done this in a couple months. Ashton, where can people follow you?
I'm on Twitch at Yeti Boatman. I stream on Wednesdays and might start streaming on Tuesdays occasionally too.
Molly?
Oh, at Molly Damon on Twitter. And then, Star Wars Explained.
Which, if you're watching here, you probably know what that is.
Yeah.
I get my Star Wars knowledge from you. You don't yell at me like my brother when I go, "Who's this character?" And he's like, "What is wrong with you?"
Well, see, my fandom, whenever I try to think about how to treat someone, I think of like, okay, but when I ask a question about the MCU, that's how would I want to be treated?
Yeah. So if I came in here and was like, "What is wrong with you? You not know about the TVA?" So there's a reference in.
Exactly. Hitman Hudson, thanks so much for sending another Streamlab. Kind of unrelated, but has anyone read the Legion of Superheroes comics? Because those slap. Well, I certainly haven't.
I mean, Legion's awesome.
What are those about?
If it's the Legion I'm thinking of, they're in the future. They're like the far-flung future of DC Comics, basically is what it boils down to. A lot of characters that are in the, like, Supergirl's got a lot of the characters. The Brainiac from the future, and then they got, like, I think Elastigirl's on that team. Last time I really sit down and read Legion was long before Brian Michael Bendis started writing it. So it's I know more old school stuff unless you're reading the current stuff. Yeah, cool. That's a good way to put it. Justice League of the future. Basically, they're all inspired by current Justice League, and they're like the 25th century. And so they have 25th century technology.
Cool.
I've never heard of that.
Right, they disappeared for like 30 years. They came back recently and it didn't do well. So it's kind of already disappeared.
Well, that's going to be it for today's episode. Thanks again to Comicstorian for joining us. We're going to be back, Molly and I, on Star Wars Explained tomorrow to talk about The Bad Batch with Kyle Katarn and Star Wars Music Minute. So look forward to that. But we're going to wrap it up for today. I always want to say, may the Force be with you at the end, because that's my habit. But thanks for watching, and may the Force be with you.
I mean, it still works.
Yeah, it's always nice.